Well, welcome back to Ironside's podcast. We're at SHOT Show 26 in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's the thing. It's the big event that happens at the first of the year every year. And I've got Joe Hamilton from Vortex Optics. Joe, welcome to the show, man. I'm stoked for this.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, it's exciting to be here. So,
yeah, this is I've wanted to have conversations with people inside Vortex for quite some time, and I've had a few. And so there's a lot of similarities. And the thing that comes up, and we're going to talk a lot about this, I have a lot of questions for you. I want to talk about the business, I want to talk about the history of it and the people. But the people part is the part that is most consistent. The products speak for themselves, and we can talk about that if you want. But this is more about, for me, this is more about getting inside the head of the head, right? That seems to have a really good handle on that messaging that comes down the line, especially with like the loyalty of the people that you have. The expertise that they have is excellent, but there's a culture that's been built there, and I think this is a good opportunity to maybe get into that. We can get there,
right?
But let's just start with a little bit of you. Let's just get a little backstory.
For sure.
Like, how'd you wind up in the seat that you got? And just give some context for people that may not know a lot about you. Because I don't have a ton of intel on you, so this is going to be fun for me.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll kind of do a little Cliff Note version, and then we can dive into wherever. So,
perfect.
So I'm, my father, did 3 tours in Vietnam. He got out. He threw a dart at a dartboard of respectable careers, and it landed on dentistry, of all things.
Okay.
So he goes to school for dentistry, meets my mom. He's in dentistry for 10 years, ends up having 3 boys, and then him and my mom would have another years later. But he hated being a dentist. Okay. And
that doesn't sound weird to me, if I'm being honest.
Not at all.
No disrespect to dentists out there, but.
Right. But no, he's like, I hated looking at people's mouths all day. He tried as hard as he could to make it an enjoyable experience, but nobody likes going to the dentist. He didn't like that. So anyways, for kind of like stress relief, he would take our family out, and we'd go hiking. We'd be in the outdoors. My mom started to get in backyard bird feeding. And so they would frequent the stores called Wild Birds Unlimiteds. Yeah, there was only a few, at the time. And so my dad kind of looked around in the shop when he'd be in there, and he'd be like, I think I could have a shop like this. And it would be a lot less stressful, because, of course, retail is very, there's no stress there, right?
Oh, none, zero.
So you would find out. So long story long, or short, I should say, is he makes some inroads with the franchise, and they're like, hey, it'd be great if you opened up a store. And so they sent him on a trip to Wisconsin, and they said it's either, because there was enough stores in Indiana, according to them, and they said you can go to Milwaukee, Green Bay, or Madison. If you know the geography, you're going to hit Milwaukee if you're coming up from Indiana, and that was too big. He hit Green Bay, that was too small, and on his way back, he hit Madison, and this is, 85. And so it said, just right. And so he ended up selling his practice, and as him and my mom like to say, they came up in a covered wagon from Indiana to Wisconsin, and he started this Wild Birds Limited store, and that was in '86. And so shortly thereafter, he would start selling, bird seed and bird feeders and things like that, and people would come in saying, hey, I need some optics to look at these birds in my backyard. Can you help me out? There's no internet at the time, so he's sending everybody to camera stores because that's kind of where you got that stuff. But sure enough, he quickly learns or thinks, hey, if everybody is asking me for this stuff, maybe I should sell it as opposed to sending them out.
Makes sense. It's good business sense.
Right. So he calls up those companies, all the optics companies at the time. Some are still around, but some aren't. And they pretty much laughed him off the phone. They're like, I've never heard of your store. I don't know whether you sell toucans or whatever, but I'm not sending my rep out there. Right. So my dad, is, just a little bit more ornery back in those days. It's kind of like, okay, cool. You're not going to sell me? Well, I still want to test this hypothesis. So he went to a local store, bought 12 binoculars, came back in his store, cleared out a case, put them in there.
Resold them.
Marked him $1 over what he paid for them.
Okay.
Purely just to run the test, right? So sure enough, he sells all of it. And in a couple weeks, and then he calls those companies back and he says, hey, here's what I did. Here's what happens. How about now? And so they kind of laughed. They were like, Dan, technically you violated every one of our dealer agreements, but this is impressive. We'll send a rep out.
Okay.
So then, they come out, they sign him up as a dealer, but he could tell just even in the briefcase that there was a lot of different price lists and he was not getting the best one. And so he realized I got to sell more volume than just my little store could do. And so he started a mail order company called Eagle Optics, which would eventually become an e-tailer. And then what happened there was, is all the other Wild Birds Unlimited stores would say, hey, I'd love to get optics from you, Dan. I can't open up, an account myself, but you can help me out. So he'd try to help them out. And then they would say, because they're small retail stores, they'd be like, hey, the margins are terrible, Dan. They'd actually sometimes even get upset. And so he'd say, I'm selling it to you for what my cost is. So that led him into getting into creating his own Eagle Optics line.
Okay.
So he'd sell that retail along with everything else, and he'd wholesale that back to the Wild Birds Unlimiteds. But of course, being a retailer, he knew everything that was frustrating about being a retailer. And there was a lot that was frustrating how they were treated. And so he really felt like there was an opportunity to have something more than just a house brand eventually. And so as far as my story, all throughout there, me and my two older brothers, and then eventually my younger brother, we were always working
in the store.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like if you're not in a sport, which I played a lot of sports so I could get out of that. But, you were getting drugged to the store and you were working and you had to, bird seed, bird baths, and you had to sell the occasional optic. And then with Eagle Optics, you'd help out there. So, like we were talking about earlier, if you grow up in a family business, one of the most common things the kid will say is, there's no way I'm ever getting in this family business. And so that's where I was. I was bound and determined. I went to college down at Appalachian State. If you ever go there, you have to call it Appalachian State. Okay. Just FYI for those out there. I tried to convince them all my freshman year to change, and that didn't go over well. But I went down there, ended up playing football, was not a star or anything. I walked on. That was a good experience, but had a lot of injuries, so it didn't necessarily go as well as I wanted it to go. But I did meet my wife down there. But anyways, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. I mean, I was really good in debate classes, communication classes. And so I thought the lawyer was, Perry Mason, Matthew McConaughey in A Time to Kill. Right? That was all what a lawyer was about.
Sexy stuff for sure.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So then I graduate and I start investigating it a little bit more. And I'm like, oh, not quite as sexy as I thought. Right. Not sure I'm ready for 3 more years of school. So right around that time, my dad was looking to kind of venture outside of just this birding market and outside of selling, being a retailer and then having his own in-house brand. And he kind of wanted to have a brand or brands that stood on their own. And so he was getting ready to start that other side of the business. And he was like, hey, I mean, you bailed on law school at the last minute. I need somebody to help me get this off the ground. You want to help out? So I kind of just helped out just out of necessity. I mean, the whole plan was until you figure out what you really want to do. But I really caught on to the entrepreneurial bug really quick. I mean, obviously in the early days, everything is sales and marketing. Yep. I loved how you could try what I call experiments. And if you completely whiffed, it didn't matter because nobody knew who you were.
Just you.
So you could just iterate, and it was super interesting. So in 2002, Vortex started, but it was one of several brands that we had. So we were laughing about this last night. We had Masterpiece Opera Glass Collection. We had Audubon, National Audubon Society line of binoculars. We had collegiate licensed binoculars. So Bucky Badger, Michigan Wolverine binoculars. I mean, we had all these Radiant tripods. We had all these different lines. So it was very much, now at 22, I didn't realize we were doing a shotgun approach because I thought they were all going to hit. I mean, I thought my kids were going to go to college because of Sportaculars, which was the collegiate license stuff. That shotgun approach, accidental shotgun approach, ended up really helping because the first 3 years, we figured out everything that worked and didn't work.
A lot of exposure.
Well, exactly. And we found out what we really liked. And so, we've really found out we liked, kind of the hunting and shooting industry more. Mm-hmm. It's more of a masculine industry than the birding. So that I think played into it, as well as, my brother and several other people that we had hired were into guns, into hunting, into shooting. And that's was the people that was buying the most of our products. We had already kind of exhausted what you could do in the birding market. So all the new folks we were opening up as retailers.
That's what was going to be my question. I can't imagine the birding market is that big.
It's not. It's not. Which, by the way, if we want to get into later, can be funny because years later, I mean, several years into getting into hunting and shooting, we had so many people that were either retailers or competitors that were just like, if we could just break into that birding market, like, because there was, this is interesting from a business perspective. You've probably seen this is data can be great and it can be awful.
Paralyzing.
And so one of the things that came out was a census back then that said, and I don't know what the question was on the census, but it must have been something like, do you watch birds in your backyard or something like that? Well, anyways, 120 million people said yes.
Oh, okay.
So everybody was spending just crazy amounts of monies to get into the birding market because they thought, there's 120 million customers. So we love that market. That's where our roots are. We still service that market, but you're right. Size-wise, the hunting and shooting market is a lot bigger. But that's how I got into it and cut my teeth in sales and marketing. And then, eventually started to get some teams under me as we started to grow. But I've always been a big culture guy. I've always been a big principle guy over tactics. My dad was that way. He was always that way. He was always preaching principles. Like the golden rule, like that travels well, right? We can drop you in anywhere and
it never gets old.
It never gets old, right? And it's kind of this North Star, and there's a bunch of different principles. And I could see how they were playing out in our business. And I think one of my roles outside of just sales and marketing in the beginning is my dad is he's kind of from the John Wayne, era.
Okay.
So he's really smart, but like when he teaches, it's by example and it's in the moment. So you got to be there for when it happens.
It's like being a dad.
Yeah. And so I was there when it would happen. So a lot of what I would do I would say, okay, we got to lean into the law of multiplication. So that I would try to take his teachings and then get it out to the company so that everybody could kind of catch that vibe. But anyways, it just, it was kind of like it just kept growing and growing and growing. And we always had our nose to the grindstone. He is a grinder. And so everybody in our company is that way. And so eventually we looked up and it was like, oh my gosh, like we were just nobody that nobody knew who we were. They would laugh at us and now we're, obviously a much larger brand and people know who we are. And so even when I see we look like the hat, like it never gets old for me. I just think it's the coolest thing ever that somebody is like wearing our hat.
This actually explains a lot, connects a lot of dots for me.
Yeah.
One of I had a conversation with one of your employees and I was just kind of talking. It was actually early last year. It was about this time last year, I think, just following SHOT Show, and everybody had kind of come in really hot to the year. Like I remember there was a really. I've not been here that many times. I think it was like my fourth or fifth one, but there was a different energy coming out of the show last year. People were very positive. People were buying stuff and putting in orders and whatever, and economy this, economy that, and then a couple months in, everything kind of hit the brakes. Right, with new administration in the White House, tariffs. Any number of things, right? Which kind of put the shutdown on a lot of that energy, and then ultimately the spending and the projects, and people were scrapping, product launches and all that stuff. And I had asked this person, I said, hey, like how's it going? Like what's going on over there? So we're just kind of hanging in there. And I said, well, it's interesting because the folks that I'm talking to, elsewhere are hurting right now, and as a matter of fact, they're laying people off. And I found out that this person is now over at the other company, and that now this person is, wearing multiple hats at this company to kind of make stuff up or make up ground. But my point in saying that is I did not know this, and it should have dawned on me. I just don't pay attention. I didn't pay attention to it, but because it was one of the really interesting things that kind of helped was that we're into the golf market, and somebody suggested that we might get into there somehow or whatever. It was a story that he told me, and so the story and that. It makes perfect sense. Laser rangefinders, optics on the golf course, and massive market, right? Global market for that matter. And I thought about that, and I went, I don't know that I've ever heard of another company that's so well known in the firearms hunting industry, right? That's diversified like that. And now there might be many, but I just don't know that many. And I thought that was really smart. So the story you just told, is basically the roots of the company anyways. Like we've always kind of played in different markets, and we've looked at different opportunities, and in this case, what a great what a great way to keep the thing together. So
I'm glad you hit on that, because we love the hunting and shooting market. I mean, we are Second Amendment supporters, like through and through, public land supporters. I mean, hunting and shooting is extremely authentic to the people at Vortex. That said, I don't like calling us a hunting and shooting brand. And I don't even like calling us an optics brand.
Interesting.
Now, I'm not a moron. I know that optics keeps the lights on, and it's probably always going to be that way. But we're in the people business, okay? And we're in the service business. And we don't look at service as subservient. We look at it as our superpower. And so, I don't think we're probably ever going to get into selling toilet seats. All right. But a couple things have come up, and just kind of like the hunting, us getting in hunting was, and it's a little bit of a riff off Jim Collins, who I'm a big fan of, but his hedgehog concept, which is you're passionate about it, you think you can be best in the world at it, and it drives your economic engine. The other one I'd put up in there, and you could maybe throw it in with passion, but I think it's a little bit different, is connection. And I would say, how connected are you to that market, to the people that serve that market, and how connected are you to your own organization? And so I'll kind of let you. So when you look at golf, so it was very serendipitous how golf came up. So I thought the hunting and shooting market in the rangefinders was far bigger than the golf market. And I was talking with some people to help us with the technology for our rangefinders. Okay. And I was just trying to make small talk, and I just said something randomly, and they kind of looked at me like a third eye on my forehead, kind of like, they're like, the golf rangefinder market's huge, right?
That's pretty much how the story was told.
And right. Yeah. And so, I'd love to tell you I had the whiteboard and I strategized it out, but it almost never happens that way. And so anyway, so that kind of gave me this idea that, hey, well, we do optics, we do rangefinders. We're with the most, we sell more rangefinders in the hunting and shooting market anyway. So we're always doing that. We're already in optics. Most of the retailers that sell the golf industry are already selling our stuff, or at least significant amounts of them. Shields, Sportsman's Warehouse.
So you got the distribution.
We got the distribution. We have great, and so what I needed to understand was, the more could we be the best in the world at it, and then the passion. The connection piece was, and then is our guys also checking in with those retailers and saying, what are your thoughts? So everybody went to work when I came back, and it's like, hey, I think this is interesting. Everybody goes to work, and so the product marketers are doing their research. The dealer sales guys are connecting with the dealers. And but one thing that was really interesting in that was we found out how much passion there was in golf in the building. It's not as high as hunting and shooting, but it was very high. Okay. So all throughout the organization, there was a ton of passion around golf. And of course, when everybody did their research and all the things, we came back and everybody was super stoked to kind of enter into that market. And as I would say, run an experiment. So when we run an experiment, we never bet the farm. So if it goes belly up, the business isn't going under. But we're going to invest enough that if it doesn't work out, it's going to stink. So, but then also, this is another thing that my dad was really good at, and I kind of credit him for, is the law or principle of compounding. And that is, he has a long-term lens. And so we've always had a long-term lens. So we'll look at numbers, we look at data. However, it's not like we're not trying to go to the quarter. And so it's like, okay, we're committed to golf, and we're gonna continue to work through this, and it's gonna be 5, 6, 7 years before we get this thing really where we think it can go. But we're committed long term. So we don't have this. We look at short term data, but we don't have this short term lens. And so, but that was how golf came together. And I think, so we got some crew down at PGA, which is the same time. Fun. And then obviously people up here at SHOT.
So again, it connects a lot of dots, but there's a lot of takeaways in that just with regard to, well, the hedgehog principle is interesting to me, and I've heard this before. Yeah. And the way, the checking in, I guess, just with the team. Well, let me back up. It's a family-owned business, right? So there's a connection to it, and there's more than just an ownership to it, right? This is our lifeblood. This is what we do. This is who we've been, for a long time. So there's a deeper connection to it, right? Yep. So I imagine we can talk about this, like acquisitioning people to come on the team to be a part of that. They're going to have to be welcomed in, and that could be a lot for them. So we can talk a little bit about like how you get the talent that you have, but the sending people out to get a finger on the pulse of kind of maybe where your customers and your retailers are, but then to come back and also check the pulse of the people in the building about how they're feeling about it. Not just that Joe made a decision today, and this is what we're doing now. That is, it's pretty uncommon. I don't think that's how most business leaders make decisions.
Right.
Like, this is what we're doing. This is what the board wants. Right. This is what the consumer market wants.
Yeah.
And we're going to make those two things happen. Right. And you're doing it whether you want to or not.
Right.
Now, I know not every decision can be made like that. Like, you have a business to run. But at the same time, when you just walking through that, and I think the thing that really connects the dot is the principles by which you explained at the beginning of this. I think people can really relate to that. And I imagine your employees, when that brings trust to what it is that you're asking them to do.
Right.
And then the people sitting next to them, like, they know it's a little bit bigger than that, than just the product, right? This is a big deal, and we're doing this, and we're all in. We don't expect miracles overnight, but we expect everybody to work hard for the next 5, 6, 7 years to get to where we want to go. So everybody's moving in the same direction. They're all on the bus.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought this up. So you're right. Not every decision can you check in with everybody and get and talk to everybody. Sometimes sometimes the timeline's so short, or it's just not it's not applicable or appropriate. But to the extent that we can and that I can. I kind of go by this principle: is people love to be part of a world they help create.
Yep.
People got to get their fingerprints on the idea. And so, in fact, there's we call it the impact equation. I mean, we just kind of like branding it almost, just because it's a lot of other organizations reach out and ask for help. And so if you can kind of imagine this idea that you've got the quality of the decision and you have the buy-in of the team. Okay. And this isn't scientific, but you score them from 1 to 10 on each side, right? And so, generally speaking, when a leader or a leadership team work on a decision and they're working days and weeks and months, I mean, typically the quality of the decision is going to be pretty decent, right? But when they come on down the mountain, like Moses, and they hand it to everybody who had no say in it, they got none of their fingerprints on the idea. The buy-in's pretty low.
And so is the accountability.
So is the accountability. And so if you times those numbers together, you might have an 8 out of 10. Let's just say you've even got a 9 out of 10. But you got a 2 on the buy-in. That's an 18 if you just do this, kind of this multiplication. But then let's say you go to the team, and the idea is going to get better because they're going to see blind spots you didn't see. But let's just, for the sake of this, say it got worse. It's not, but let's say it got worse. Let's say it went to an 8. Went from a 9 to an 8. But the buy-in went from a 2 to 8. Well, if my math is right, that's a 64. 64 is a lot bigger than 18.
Yep.
Now, I know there's some people that want to see a scientific proof that proves that out, but I'll tell you what, if anybody that's an adult that's listening to this just goes back in their mind, either somebody who didn't get their fingerprints on it, or a leader who had a good idea, but didn't let other people get how was the buy-in? It probably didn't go well. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Is what I try to do, I lob stuff out all the time. And I know I can make a decision. I'm the CEO, but it's not about that. I want to see people get their fingerprints on it. I want to see get the buy-in, and that's when usually. And then also, it's fun. It's fun when there's buy-in.
Yeah.
I mean, people, you can see them lit up.
There's energy.
There's energy about it. And here's another stat that's kind of interesting that I looked up the other day, in a conversation. So the average adult from 18 to 65, just a 9 to 5, it's roughly 90,000 hours.
I never did that math.
Right.
Okay.
So we were having a conversation with somebody, and they were talking about a place that they'd used to be at, and it was just this soulless existence at work. And so I looked that up, and then we started talking about work-life balance, which I don't like work-life balance.
I have a tough time with it too.
Because it's all just life.
Yeah.
But if you got 90,000 hours at your job, and if you're a leader and you're responsible people that are investing some or all of those 90,000 hours, I think you owe it to them to try to get it where it's not the soulless existence. You get that energy. Yes, you've got to perform. Like, we have to perform. But at the same time, I do think we perform better when you get that buy-in.
I couldn't agree with you more. Going back to the accountability piece and the energy piece, I think what it also does, going back to decision making, is if I have my fingerprints on this and I understand it more, and I'm also bought into it.
Right.
I know where this needs to go. I think that impacts decision making at critical times in a critical way.
Right.
In that, I feel like I'm part of this company, or I am this company. Like, if I'm making this decision today, like, am I just going to mail this one in, or am I going to think about this and understand, like, there could be consequences here, and I don't want that for the team. I don't want that for me or whatnot. I can't hide in the corner on this. Or if something comes up and you're recognizing, look, we do have conversations about this, though, the old Kaizen, philosophy, like when something's wrong, like something doesn't look right here, like we need to stop and somebody needs to say something and we need to listen to that person talk about this. Again, going back to the process to get there, I think it drives people to make a little bit more of a critical, caring decision to some extent. And man, that's important, carrying all the way down the line and all the different elements of the business, right on down to what you said earlier, which was about the service end of things, right? I think it's pretty powerful. I don't think a lot of companies operate like that, which is why I want to talk to you. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, one thing, if somebody who's in a leadership position is hearing this and they're really, scared about leaning into that a little bit, is you can always tell people like, hey, listen, I'm going to reserve the right to make the final decision. Not everybody gets a vote, but everybody has a voice. So you can kind of like upfront let people know, because every now and again you get somebody who says, well, I gave my opinion and they didn't take it, so I'm never giving my opinion again, which I don't think is a good way to live. Now, if you've given your opinion 100 times and they never listen to it, okay, fair. But I think the idea for a leader, sometimes they're afraid to give up the control. And so just set the expectation up front. Just say, hey, I want your fingerprints on this. I want your buy-in. I want you to really feel ownership over this and be part of a world you help create. That said, I'm going to reserve the right to make the final call, but you've got a voice and we want to hear it.
Yeah, I think there's a unique part about Vortex in this, and that the longevity that you have, right, as the leader, right? It was dad before, now you, and the family aspect that's there, that this is not, when I look at the business, I used this word before we went on air, just that the hunting and shooting industry is very incestuous, right? In terms of leadership and all on down the line. I mean, I can go down on the floor and people that were wearing one name tag, or one shirt with a, the monogram on it. This year was a different one last year.
Right.
And that's good in a sense because people know one another and they understand the industry and whatever. And that's good that we can keep people in the economics of keeping, good stuff out there and whatnot. However, the challenge with that is it's just a product. It's just a thing. Like I sell the widget, right? Yep. I know how this, just show me what your process is and I'll figure out how to talk about it and fit it into your process.
Right.
Versus this, again, this deeper, these, I guess, roots that exist here. And again, understanding that like, this has been the family business forever. Like this guy's not bailing out to go work for another optics company. Right. And so with that comes this being incestuous. It's weird these days. I live in the Silicon Valley, and so if you work for a company for 3 to 5 years, like that's an eternity. Like it's
like 50 in 2026.
Exactly, it's an eternity. So building that trust, but also building those processes and building those decision making abilities and things like that, and knowing that this thing is going long term. Like they're saying this, like I might not like this decision, but if it's the best for the company, it's best for the company. Whatever, I have my thoughts about it, but I can move forward, knowing that I'm not going to have another boss in a year, or that that we're not going to have another CEO in 2 years or whatever else. Because there's a lot of that going on. I was that guy in a business, worked for a very large company. The third leadership change, I don't have the energy for this, man. Like because I've seen it happen now enough times, and what that process looks like. Like, you can tell me whatever you want. I'm just going to nod my head. And, okay. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking like, you're just here long enough to come in and, pardon my language, but I call it pigeon management, right? Where you just come in and they shit on everything and then they leave, right? And then you're left to clean up the mess, right? Or somebody else is. And sometimes there's opportunities when that happens or whatever, but I didn't have the energy for it. And that's dangerous. And ultimately that company went bankrupt, right? And it was because of what I just said, right? People are just like, I don't trust it. Now I'm out looking for another job. Now I'm not putting in those 90,000 hours, or the 90,000 hours that I might spend there. I'm not giving you all 90,000. I don't clock watching or whatever else. Anyway, that's
totally. No, it's, you hit on something too that, just the continuity. And so for example, we've got, kind of my right-hand man at work is Seamus. So he leads the sales team now. And I think this is maybe year 28 or 27 or 28. And he was with me, he's been with our company since he's been 14. And we were selling initially from the jump together. And then when I stepped out of sales, he had already been there. Everybody sees him. They know he's the same guy every year. And so obviously he does a phenomenal job. And, but I think that just the fact that they have that continuity, it's the same guy, it's the same team under him year after year. They don't know that they know that his shirt's not going to change and the logo's not going to change. He hears about that a lot of times. I hear about a lot of times because people will send me a really positive, email or note about him and his team. And they mention that, and I think another thing is that there's so much, we think we make decisions logically, but we really don't. And I would actually argue that I don't know if we make decisions logically, maybe 5% of the time that's part of the equation. It's
probably pretty good.
I think one of the things that is, feelings and emotions and that kind of invisible aspect of making a decision is your comfort level and your trust level. And so I think, I think when people find a good organization that treats them well and they stay there, there's a lot of benefits that are kind of unseen for both, for everybody, for the customer, for them, and for the company. So I think that's people don't ask me about that enough, but I think that's a really good insight.
So it's funny you say that, because when I gave you a little bit of my background. We chatted for a few minutes on the phone before we met today. And for people listening that don't know, I've been in the fitness industry for basically my entire career. For as long as you're doing what you're doing, that's kind of what I've been doing. And going back to the buying based on emotion, there's also the selling aspect of that, right? And we can talk a little bit about that. But when I entered into this sphere, of all the things that are hunting, shooting, and all the things that come along with it, it started kind of through social media, because it was 5 years ago. It was kind of during 2020. Things were weird. And so you go to the internet because that's where all the answers are, right? And so it's like, oh, I need to know more about this. I need to know more about that. And I discovered very quickly that what I was seeing from a marketing perspective, because that's what social media is, it looked very much to me like the fitness industry. It only was like 10 years behind. So I was kind of like, oh, I kind of see where this is going. But man, there's a lot of emotion, right, in this business for a bunch of, and again, it's driven primarily by men, right, by males. And for guys that want to say they're not emotional about stuff, holy cow. Right. Like, I don't know another industry outside of the fitness industry that gets as emotional about tagging on to tribes and, products and, whatever the thing is. And so people will say, well, I buy this product because, and they'll give you a whole list of its durability, reliability, they've done this, and, they use this part and this coating, and whatever happens to be. But they're angry while they're talking about it, while they're talking about somebody else's product. Where I'm like, okay, maybe it's not anger. I don't know what I'm getting here, but it seems emotional. So it's interesting you said that, because I don't think people really think about that. Like I hear people down the floor like, I hate this company. I hate that company. Like, really, man? What do you hate? What do you hate? Why do you hate? Like, and they're literally saying, it's literally walking in the door today. Like, I hate those guys. Right when we walk through the door, it's like, that's weird. They sell apparel. Man, like, what's that about? Well, also, how's that impacting you?
I always think it's funny whenever somebody's caveats with something. I'm not one to X. Usually, that's exactly what they are.
That's what I mean. That's what I was seeing. It's like, yeah, you guys are saying one thing and doing a completely opposite thing.
Which is one of my favorite things, and least talked about things when it comes to product marketing, or basically figuring out what your customers want. And very few people talk about it, and that's observation.
Let's talk about this. How do you know?
A couple of things. So one is, you want to look at data that actually happens. Now, that's not the only thing, of course. And data, they say, figures lie and liars figures. So you got to have a lot of context around data. But one nice thing about data is, and particularly if you can tap in, if you have really good relationships with the retailers, often they'll share that. And that's the way people are acting, their buying behavior. So somebody says, I'm the kind of guy who buys this kind of thing. Okay, can we see your checkbook? Because that's actually who you really are. And so I think one is you get hard data, but I mean, we've got a lot of people that you got to just observe. So I don't do it anymore nearly as much, but when I was in sales, you'd be with the buyer a lot, but then you go to the store and you just watch, Yes, you ask some questions to the people behind the counter. Every now and again, especially in the early days, not so much now, they'd be shorthanded and you'd say, hey, can I get behind the counter? And you'd sell anybody's stuff. Even, if they wanted a different brand than Vortex, I wouldn't try to talk them out. But the whole time you're observing people. And so one thing you learn, for instance, in our industry, is there's so much technical jargon and so much technical stuff, and very few people on the other side of the counter understand it or even want to. Yeah. They're already using enough brain cells on the thing they're an expert on. And so you get people that have shot, more giant, big game stuff ever, and they hardly know what the numbers mean. They know how to use it. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times, a lot of this specs and things of that nature, it's kind of like the sword in your scabbard. Yeah. You keep the sword in your scabbard. Now, every now and again, you get some guy who comes in and he was on the internet and he's got a PhD level in this stuff. And then you can take the sword out and you can have a conversation. But I think observation of whether it's hard data or just how humans are interacting. So like for people, if they sell their stuff at a retail store, just go in there, or like a gym. I can only imagine like go and people watch. Just watch traffic, watch which machines they go to, which machines do they kind of walk over and they look at and they kind of go blank. I mean, I think you can figure out a lot, and then you do that for a long time, and you're going to really understand your customer. But one of the worst things I think you can do, and I might get killed on this, but I don't care, and everybody at the office knows this, is if you ask somebody, what are you interested in? What do you like to do in the gym, right? He or she is going to tell you a fictitious version of themselves. Now, every now and again, you'll get somebody who tells the truth. And if you can find it and you can vet that they're really good, they're kind of a really great resource. But those are the minorities. And everybody thinks they're one of those. But generally speaking, people, when they ask a direct question, often about what kind of, how they act, that's not really how they actually act.
So ask me how I know.
Yeah, and I can only imagine the fitness industry.
Yeah, so I've been in the coaching side of the business for a long time, and it always starts with basically a questionnaire. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your workout history. Yep. Tell me about where you are now. Where do you want to go? Tell me about your habits. It's never 100% accurate, right? Ever. Even if they're trying hard to be accurate, right? It's just not, because they also have a perception of what they're doing or how they've been doing it, and
they're not consciously lying.
No, I'm not. Yeah, that's the thing. And so, like, as a young coach, you think that they might be, because you're wait, hold on, this isn't working out. Like, what's going on? Like on the nutrition side, as an example, like they told you they're doing this stuff, but they think they are. Yeah, but we didn't ask the deeper level questions, right? Right. Not only that we may have had some preconceived notions about what they're doing already, or what the answer already is, like pretending that I know. Oh yeah, no, I know. Okay, I know exactly what you're doing. No, you don't, because they're not exactly telling you what they were doing, because they don't know, maybe. Right. So again, the two most important skills that I've ever learned, and I've shared on the when people ask me, I'll tell them, but the two most important skills are questioning skillfully and listening carefully. Yeah. And when you hear that answer, or whatever you're observing, and I think that also comes in, like, the listening is also observing. Right. And particularly, you use the gym analogy, just go in and kind of watch people's behaviors and what they're doing. You'll learn a lot from that. So, and you have to do it, again, with an unbiased or non-preconceived or pre-programmed idea of, like, they're going to meet these 3 tick boxes. One of these things is going to happen when they tell me this answer. Now, you can get pretty close with those tick boxes. You can narrow it down. However, what that tick box will do, the only thing it does is it just kind of gives you the direction on where to ask the next questions. Right. So you can get a little bit more detail and a little bit more detailed.
So you hit on a couple, I think, really, really interesting stuff. So first of all, is you mentioned you have to be objective. Mm-hmm. And I think, and I can only imagine in the fitness industry, but it's in our industry too, and maybe every industry, is the more passionate you are about that thing, generally speaking, the more subjective you're going to be versus objective.
Then here comes the emotion.
You're right. You either need to kind of like check yourself, or you need to have people within your business
that will do that for you,
or that maybe aren't as close to the thing, right? They're kind of into it, but they're not as passionate as you, but that allows them to have a more objective view. Somehow you got to get objective. And then you hit on another thing I thought was really interesting, but it takes more work. And that is you were treating, the way you described interacting with a client, you were treating each client in a unique way.
It is an individual.
As an individual, right? As opposed to a cookie cutter. So it's interesting because in our industry, so we're selling to retailers. and they sell to the consumers, right?
The individuals. Yep.
Right. So we've got roughly 1,400 retailers, and what we find is a lot of our competitors and a lot of people in the industry, what they'll do is they'll say, I want to have a promo in fall. And so we're going to spend a lot of time and energy coming up with the perfect promo for us. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to hammer it down
to the customer,
to the retailers, right? But the retailer comes back and they're like, but I've got a fall plan.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want to do in my fall plan. So what happens a lot of times, and this is another, you want to get me on one. So I'm not really against efficiency, but you might think I'm anti-efficiency. And the reason is, in that scenario, whether it's somebody at the gym or it's a retailer, what is efficient, according to most people, is do something so you can cookie cutter it, so you can assembly align it. But you know who hates that? In our case, the dealer or the customer. Nobody wants to be cookie cutter treated that way.
This is my store, man.
Exactly.
I'm selling your stuff.
Right.
But this is my store.
Yes.
My baby.
So I think one of the things, it's harder to do. It takes more work. It takes more energy.
100%.
But I think the finished product, whether you're somebody that's being personally trained or whether you're a retailer and ultimately the end consumer, is if you can lean into treating each individual person individually and trying to customize stuff to them, it's more work, it's more energy, but I really think the payoff for everybody in that exchange is far better. And I think you hit right on that.
So are you about to tell me then that, when it comes to a promo that you're going to run, before that promo even before we even think about exactly what that promo is, we're touching base with our retailers and doing surveys or having, your reps talk individually with these folks and bring back that feedback?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, we only go dealer direct. Mm-hmm. So we don't go through distribution. And the reason that is we want a relationship with every retailer.
Right.
And so not every promo are we going to go to every 1,400 retailers, but we're definitely going to bounce stuff off. We bounce new product ideas off of them. We bounce promotions off of them. We bounce pricing changes off of them. And again, similar to kind of that impact equation I talked about, they've got a voice. They may not have a vote, right? But they've got a voice, and then therefore they've got more buy-in on the finished product. So we're constantly doing this feedback loop. I'm not a huge fan of surveys. I think they have a place. I think people really don't, because things are like SurveyMonkey and it's great and everything, to actually come up with a survey that is unbiased, or you would get objective data, is actually far more difficult than people think.
I agree with you.
They've got, you should really, people can just Google that, coming up with a survey. So I'm not totally against surveys, but a lot of times what I really like is just having a conversation, because another thing that I've noticed is if you and I have a conversation and like we're having now, and you've got an idea, some questions that you want to ask, and you probably ask a lot of them. But a lot of them, we're going to talk about things and you're going to notice a thread. And you're like, I want to go down that thread a little bit, right?
That's what this is.
Right? And so a lot of the answers that you're going to get is going to be it's going to be between the lines, in the subtext. It's going to be in those little, kind of rabbit holes that we go down, versus just the initial questions that you had. And I think if you've got a survey, it's almost too rigid. It's too structured. And especially if you don't allow them to, and it's more work on your part because you're gonna have to read them. But if you have an open-ended question,
sure.
I think those are more valuable than check 1 to 5. Because again, we think when we get that data back on the 1 to 5, they're giving us a fictitious version of themselves.
I think that the way that particular type of survey being structured is biased in and of itself, because you're trying to get a specific answer to a specific thing.
Right.
And the questions in the multiple choice or whatever that you provided them is going to be biased there. Yeah, this speaks to the service thing, and I want to get to that. But I think again, understanding the customer and what's out there. Here's what I see from the consumer looking back in, who just tries to, I'm a nerd. Going back to being objective and observing, that's what I on the fitness side as an example, we talk about this all the time with our crew, you know, and they're all coaches, been doing it a long time. So like you see somebody walking, you'd be out to eat or whatever it is. And you see someone like, oh man, look at that gate. You know, like, I wonder what's happening there or what that thing is. It's like, it's just what you do, right? It's like,
it's people watching.
Yeah. If you own a business and you walk into somebody else's business that has a similar business, you're just watching how it operates. You're going, oh, I have questions about that, man. What's going on? Oh, that was wrong. Like I would never do that kind of thing. Right. But I think it links to how products get delivered to the market, right? And so what I see or what I observed very early on was, why did somebody think this was a good idea? Like they're racing to the SHOT Show with the new thing, like with the new gadget or the new version of whatever they had. What drove that decision making? Right? Was it because you talked to the customer and they told you like this was really important for them and this is what they really need? Or did you see that some other company was doing this and now you're racing to the finish line to try and put something to be competitive with it? Well, and I don't know all the answers to that question, but I came into it, I was like, this is really wild to me how the decision-making in terms of product is being made. And I come back to Vortex, right? And look, you're going to experiment, you're going to try new things. I mean, that's part of what you do, but fundamentally, it hasn't changed, right? And it doesn't change year to year. It's the same thing, which I thought was interesting, which was one of the standout things for Vortex for me.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that I think always works well, and we call it build backwards. And so it's kind of a riff off of Stephen Covey's Begin with the End in Mind, but you build backwards, right? So you start with the consumer and you work back. So for us, we're going to start with the consumer. We're going to work back to the dealer. We're going to work back to ourselves. And so I think one of the things is typically when we try those experiments and it's a product or it's a category and it works really well, we've done the build backwards really, really well. And in some cases, customers are already and dealers are already proactively saying, you need to get in this. Here's what people are looking for. Here's kind of the price points. And so we're proactively getting that. In some cases, we're going to them and we're saying, we've got this idea, what do you think? And just get feedback. What do you think on the price points? And so typically when we've done that well, and then we've got a lot of users in-house. And so we'll get all that feedback. And then, usually it's our product development meeting. And there is, I think a lot of people would think there's too many people in there that if they were to observe it, but I like it. I mean, we argue in that meeting. There's a lot of respect in that meeting, but it's got people from product marketing, from supply chain, obviously from your new product development team, test and evaluation. I'll be in a lot of those, and we'll argue over all kinds of things. And people are presenting data, and people are presenting feedback. Like I said, there's a high deal of respect, but there's a high deal of people, have this trust that they can share. And so it, in my opinion, it always leads to better decisions. It's like somebody throws out a lump of clay and everybody's getting in there and working on it. And sometimes you want to make a decision, but you realize in that kind of arguing and that wrestling back and forth, you're like,
the right time.
Well, or we don't have enough. We don't have enough feedback. We got to go back out again. And so we move quickly, thankfully, when we're in meetings. There's not a lot of committees and there's not a lot of bureaucracy, but oftentimes we'll find, okay, we got to run this by the retailers. We got to run, because it's as you know, it's a little bit of a Rubik's Cube. You can't just have good technology. That's really important. But you got to have the price point right. You've got to have, there's all these variables that you kind of have to lock in. And so it's not just, you can't just come up with a widget and be like, okay, and then get it out there and it's going to work. There's just a lot more to it than just that.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds simple, right? And that's the way I understand it as well. But that is not the behavior that I see a lot of companies work with in this space. Right. Again, maybe they're chasing a contract, right? With some big contract, whatever it is, with somebody. So they're being told this is what we need. They're bidding for that contract, and so they build it around it. And then it's like, well, we're building all this stuff. How do we get this into the consumer market too, right? So it's the opposite way of what you just said. Now we have a product, and now we need to sell it, right? Versus what product do we need, right? And we'll build back. The sales process will come in later to that, but let's make sure we have the right product first. Well,
and I can only imagine this part also very much, maybe every industry, but certainly the fitness industry, but it isn't ours. One thing I notice, and I think our product team does an exceptional job at this, and also is an element of service. So everybody in our company is service. But one of the ways that they serve people, and I think a lot of people miss in our industry, is they are so close to the product. and they're really high tech engineer guys. Okay. And so, but they do in our company do a great job of making the user experience easy and simple. So they're PhD level when it comes to this stuff. So you give them a complex product with a complex menu and complex, UX, UI, and they'll figure it out,
yeah.
right? But that's not what the person buying it at the retail store is like.
Right.
The person at the retail store, they're more like me.
They want to put the optic on the gun and go out and zero and shoot their guns.
Exactly.
Right,
and so I think that's, again, that's an element of serving the consumer and also building backwards. Is they're not dumb, but they're not. I mean, you do this from 8 to 5 every day, and you went to school for engineering and things like that. So it's extremely easy for you, but they're an expert in their field. And so I think our team, one of many things that they do well is they make sure that the user experience is exceptional, not just the technology.
So I wonder, I'm glad you brought that up. So again, going back, living in Silicon Valley, this is a thing that I hear a lot from our clientele, right? Yep. And it's all tech support somewhere in there. It's software, it's something, right? Could be hardware, could be whatever, but they're all working for the same in the same industry. And what I hear quite frequently from the salespeople is, they're trying to service a customer and sell the product, and they need engineering help, so they have to talk to the engineering team. And the engineering team thinks the sales team's an idiot, right? And the sales guy thinks the engineer's an idiot, but the engineer has the PhD, right? Or the whatever, right? All the degrees.
Right.
It's like, look, dude, I am just trying to make this work for this customer.
Right.
And this is a very large customer that has we have a lot into this. Can we just get this figured out?
Right.
Well, what do you need figured out? Well, I need it to do this. Well, we can't do that. Or like it doesn't work that way. Well, then tell me how it works. I can't really explain to you how it works because, again, I don't have the brain, I don't have the experience on how to articulate this to you. Okay, tell me what it can do.
Right.
Well, it can do this. No, I know it can do that. My point is like sales is pissed at marketing. Marketing is pissed at engineering. Engineering is pissed at sales. Like there's not this communication going on. And I see that here and I see that in this space too. Like it's clear, like somebody really put a lot of thought into this product, but the way it's being delivered to market, we are not connecting here. So,
what I would say, and this is probably a little aggressive for me to say this because, of course, every situation is different. But and I'm going to throw out a maybe an analogy of what maybe happens in the fitness industry, and you'll have to tell me if I'm right. But I think that's an alignment issue, and I think that's a hiring issue. And
exactly what it is.
And because I think what a lot of people do is they'll hire brilliant engineers or brilliant salespeople for that matter, right? And they're like, well, I got brilliant salespeople, and I got brilliant engineers, and why isn't it working?
Right.
But they really need to hire for people who are, they're good at questions. They're good at listening. They're empathetic. And I know it's really squishy and a lot of people may be uncomfortable with it, but they're really good from an emotional intelligence perspective.
That's squishy.
Because the thing is that engineer needs to understand, okay, this salespeople wants to sell something. They want to help that customer. They're actually coming to me, which actually is a bonus from a jump, right?
They need help.
Right. And they're trying to articulate something. And so instead of thinking, well, they're just an idiot and they're not on my level, you can think, okay, not like what was going to really make me a good engineer is if I'm able to work with salespeople and able to deliver something to the consumer. And on the salespeople perspective, same thing, right? Understand the product and be able to articulate well. And so I think that what I would like to see and what we try to do in our place is, and we call this the complementary edge. I mean, and I believe it was Traction, the guy who wrote that has a book called Rocket Fuel, and it's mainly around CEOs and COOs. But the idea is when you have complementary skills and there's high trust and respect, you have rocket fuel, right?
Force multiplies.
Right, exactly. But when you don't, you just have friction. And it's this recipe for friction and frustration. And so a lot of times where I would say on a hiring thing is you might have somebody who's got a resume that looks superior to this guy or gal's resume, okay? But this guy or gal's emotional intelligence and all those stuff I mentioned is off the charts. So I would say, let me take the person with the people skills. They're good. I mean, I'm not saying they're an idiot when it comes to engineering, but they may not be where this person is. And I can only imagine that are the best personal trainers the most ripped people?
No.
Of course they're not. Because the most ripped person, I'm guessing, is more concerned about being ripped than they are about helping this individual.
Anybody listening to this knows the answer to that question.
Exactly, right? Okay, so my analogy was right.
However, customers make emotional buying decisions. So
right, like I want to look like that guy or gal, but that guy or gal probably doesn't care about you. They just care about.
They'll figure it out. They'll learn, but they'll have to learn the hard way.
Right.
They'll make the $600 mistake.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. That's a friction piece. And I think a lot of organizations would be better served if, and what I would recommend too, is I would flip it. Okay. Outside of maybe just an initial run through to see if they're, if it's worth doing a phone screen or something like that, hire on culture first. Do the culture piece first and be like, okay, this person fits our culture. Now let's do the skills interview. Now let's get the people in and find out how good of an engineer they are. But don't fall in love with the skills first. You'll compromise on culture every time because you're going to fall in love with the skills and be like, oh my gosh, this guy's skill set and his resume and look where he went to school and look at all these wonderful things. And then, culture, that sounds good. I think he's going to be good. But you're setting yourself up.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great segue. And just in talking about that, and I mentioned this before, like talent acquisition, and you just alluded to that.
Yep.
Like, again, it's, all right, this seems like it could be a good fit, but on paper, but let's have some conversations. Let's ask some questions. Let's get some people involved. Let's have them out and actually this was a conversation I had with Chris on the Vortex Edge team, right? And his experience with that and coming in and spending a day just with the team. And, for him, it was an interview, but it was also probably what you just said. Like, we've had some experience with Chris. Like we like this guy. He's a good shooter. Like he's a go-getter, humble guy. A lot of good things like in terms of check boxes. But let's actually find out. Let's see. Let's come hang out with him. Let's have conversations with him or whatever. And what one of the things I think the end of that story basically was like he had to cut the conversation. He was having a great time and he thought it was going well, but he didn't really know. But he was going to miss his flight home. Oh yeah. So he had to cut the conversation short or whatever. And ultimately, the end of that story is it worked out great.
And I remember his interview, Chris's, and so he had an awesome resume. Okay, but several other guys that were vying for that position
had good resumes too.
And I do remember the piece that just jumped out for him in that interview versus everybody else was the empathy that he had. And in particular, when he was training somebody who was brand new. So a lot of those other guys, they were kind of Mr. Badass. Okay. And they really wanted to project that. And Chris, even though he kind of looked like one, he was the complete opposite. And I think we even had him kind of run somebody through how we would run them through. And I wasn't there for that piece, but the feedback on that was like, not only like if I'm advanced, I'd like this guy to instruct me. And if I'm brand new, I'd like for him to instruct me. And so that's what that Edge team did from a training perspective is they made that a huge priority was like, hey, we can't just be, this SEAL team 6.
We're not chasing the tier 1 guys. Right?
Yeah. And if they want to come in and shoot, awesome. We know how to do that. But also a big part of it, I think, is we want to get people into this. And so we want it to be approachable. We don't want to feel like, well, I'm an idiot. I've never picked up a gun, especially guys like when they're in their 40s are like, I probably should know how to do this, but I don't. And so I'm afraid to actually engage.
There's fear of failure. There's fear of being embarrassed. There's totally all the things.
I'm not masculine enough because I don't know the guns. And we don't want people to feel it. We want more people in this sport. We don't want to repel people away and say, oh yeah, you're right. You're not as big of a badass as our Edge guys. You shouldn't come in here.
Yeah, it isn't very welcoming at a lot of levels. And because of the reasons that were just stated there, it's also a little taboo. I mean, let's be honest. It's kind of a weird time for the Second Amendment, in America. And so people are kind of doing it undercover, right? Mm-hmm. They're kind of doing it low, trying to fly under the radar a lot of times. A lot of people aren't, but a lot of people are. I mean, going back to my kind of entry into the industry, that happened during a time when, firearm sales was going through the roof, right? It was, again, weird times, things were happening. And I was getting highly involved in the courses, and I was just like, I need to learn more. I need to study this. I need to be more responsible. It's fun too. I like that. I'm meeting some really good people, right? Right. And early into that, I came across the Vortex Edge team. And again, coming from a service industry, that's how I make a living. Right. If you can't, you have to know what you're doing, but you have to take care of people. Right. There has to be longevity in this relationship. What am I setting up at the beginning that keeps this person here
Right.
For a long period of time. What's my lifetime customer value, right? For those people out there that pay attention to that stuff. What are the things I need to do? When I came across that team, and Chris was there, right? There's a few other guys there, but Chris was there. I saw that. Like, I observed that. I stood back and I watched because it was in an environment where there were a lot of people coming out from a lot of different angles. There were some badasses there, right? And then there were some people that were very, very much new to this. And they were able to handle both people. And it wasn't a sales deal. It was like, hey, let's get you in front of something. Like, what do you want to do?
Right.
Like, we're not trying to push you into a specific thing. And there's something to be said there in terms of the variety of things that you guys have to offer people. Right. It's not just one thing; it's many things. Fundamentally, it's this thing, right? But at a lot of levels, they get an opportunity. And I'd never seen anybody do that before in this space. Now, I'm not saying nobody else does it. I didn't know at the time, but at that point, I was like, well, this is interesting. What's going on here with the training, right? Obviously, the customer experience. I've been to range days and things like that, but it didn't look like that. It was like stand in line, come up front, right? We'll load some ammo in there. What do you think? Well, here's the specs, and this is what it does, and this is how much it costs. Right at the end of the day, there was none of that business going on. Let me show you this, and did you like that? Because if you like that, you might like this too. Like, let's give you the experience.
Right.
And I imagine going back to Chris's interview, it's kind of the same thing. Let's give him the experience and let's see if he can integrate with this experience or not. And then, whatever we got to teach him, we can teach him.
Yep.
So going back to culture and building team, right? Yep. I think you answered a lot of it, but I don't know that people maybe picking it up along the way, just in terms of one of the hardest things to build or change is culture.
Yep.
You have a unique thing here in that it was built from the get-go. Obviously, you have to learn, right? And things need to change as it gets bigger, it gets harder.
Yeah,
right. You have to make some very, very important decisions, right? They're critical from those initial hires to the next hires. And you mentioned it, passing the thing down, the thing that your dad had given you, passing it down. I wonder what are the lessons that you're learning in there, as this is going?
Yeah.
Because I got to imagine like there's going to have been some mistakes that are made. I'm not trying to back you in the corner and tell us the dirty details.
No, I don't. I know one that's coming to mind for sure.
Okay, well, I think that's important for people to hear. But at the same time, like, what do you know works really well in detail?
So I'll talk about what works well, and I'll talk about some of the mistakes that we made. I think the biggest piece, and there's another Jim Collins one that he talks about, is the whole point is you got to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, which is not fun to talk about, but that's as important, and I would argue maybe even more important. And then get the right people in the right seats. And interestingly enough, when you're first starting out, getting the right people on the bus is more important than figuring out where you have to go with the bus. And I know a lot of people, and vision and mission is important, but I would argue vision and mission, and I think this is where a lot of people get this wrong, is they make them goals, very specific goals.
Yep.
There is a place for specific goals. They shouldn't be in your vision and mission. Your vision and mission are a North Star.
Yep.
You're chasing, you're never going to get there. They're specific enough to give you an idea, but they're evergreen. They're always there. And then you can have these more tactical goals that could be quarterly, they could be yearly, so forth. But I think so when you're getting the right people on the bus, do they have a shared belief?
Yep.
A shared belief on how the world is viewed. So in our case,
worldview.
Exactly, right? So we want to get, like, number one is like, we want to get people who love people, and they think service is not subservient. They think it's a superpower. And so we want to get people who genuinely care about other people. Now, they can look different. They don't have to walk around with a Cheshire grin on their face. They can be big and burly and tattooed up. Like, that doesn't matter. It's kind of what's on the inside. And so we are going to do a lot of things to try to screen to make sure that you actually like serving people. Okay. Regardless if you're a graphic designer, web developer, or you're a frontline, on phones with customers or in the showroom, no matter where you are, that you like that. Because if you don't like that, you're not going to like it here.
Yeah.
And people here aren't going to like you.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't actually mean you're a bad person. If your whole thing, and by the way, this is on the list. I'm not against making money or being profitable. It's on the list, but it's not the center and it's not number one. But if your whole list and the center of your life is like, I'm here to max out on how much money I can get.
Metric, yep.
Like, look, my place isn't to tell you how to live your life, but don't apply a Vortex.
You're going to hate it here.
Right. But I also would say if there's an organization and you're all about that, then just own it. You'll attract the right people. Now you're going to probably have a lot of other stuff you got to deal with, but just own it. So I think that what works well is when you really understand what you're all about as a brand and you own it and you tell people, but you got to get really good at interviewing for that. And a lot of times it's asking very specific questions about what has happened. So one of the questions I like, for instance, would be, when's the last time you did something for somebody else and you didn't expect anything in return? Doesn't matter if it's in business. They might be like, well, there's a widow who lives down the street, and when it snows, I go over and I shovel her driveway and her front porch. That's not business, but is that person getting hired? Not necessarily, but that's a good start.
Yeah.
And for us, that's a really good start. How did they treat, in our case, Kim and Robin when they came in for their interview, who's right there in the showroom? Did they just stare right through them like they didn't even matter? They didn't even rate? If they're trying to get a hold of me and they work with Denise, how did they treat Denise? Right? We'll take them out to lunch. We'll take them out to happy hour, whatever works with their schedule. And a lot of this, we have a long hiring process, which is tricky. You have to be very respectful of somebody else's PTO.
Yep.
But at the same time, they tend to reveal themselves, especially when their hair is down. And their hair gets let down the more interviews they have. And when you take them out to lunch or happy hour, how were they with a waiter or waitress?
Yep.
And so you pick up on a lot of these clues. So you're looking for all these hard skills. But first we look at the culture piece. And then we look at the hard skills. And then I think another piece of it is you have to find lots of different ways to reinforce it that are authentic to you and your organization.
Give me an example.
So for me, one is like, I'm big on handwriting thank you notes. And I'm big on handwriting when somebody has a big thing that happens in their life. So they have a baby. Is there a death in the family? Did they get a promotion? Is their first anniversary or milestone anniversary, 5, 10, 15? Those moments are key moments for people when they get a new house. Now, a lot of times it's me, but a lot of times it's the leaders, because I want my leaders doing it too for their people. And, does something happen big for them? How did we show up? That's really critical. But I read a lot of handwritten thank you notes. I think that shows that you really care. Gotcha. But there's a lot of examples like that. One of the things that my dad instituted, and we still do it, is a monthly birthday party. So we will have all the people around our atrium and all on the floor. I'll get up there and I'll read what my dad called love letters, which are letters customers sent to us about their experience and how great it was.
That's cool.
So we read some of those. Then my younger brother comes on. He's a pretty funny guy. He does some interviews with some of the birthday people, and we get to know him a little bit better. And then I walk through all the new hires that month, and I walk through all the birthday people, and then we sing them happy birthday, and then everybody gets a free lunch. That was authentic to us. So if that's authentic to you and that's an idea, run with it. But the thing is, it's got to be your thing.
Yeah, totally get
Otherwise it comes across canned.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something that, but it's and really like being, so integrity is kind of like who you say you are and who you really are, and getting it like this. Right. And then you're integral. And I think to the extent that you can say, hey, this is an organization and this is how we act. And the closer you can do to this, I think is the extent that you're going to have a really successful organization. Now, there's a lot of things that I think are unique that maybe not a lot, but several that I missed on. And I'll talk about one. And that was around 2015. We were growing a lot, and we really needed to get another layer of leadership. Okay. And we needed to specialize a little bit more. Okay. So in the early days, I call it like a business buffet. Everybody gets to do a little bit of everything, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I didn't realize that a lot of people ended up falling in love with that. Mm-hmm. And then I thought when we'd specialize more, I'm helping everybody out. Right. Instead of them having all this on their plate, they just got this thing on their plate, right? Well, a lot of them hated just having this thing on their plate. They liked everything on their plate. Or a lot of times it was like my dad and then me and my brothers, they were okay with us being a lead and us kind of directing things. Yep. But then when you hired that another layer of leadership, they're like, well, hold on a minute. Like, I liked having access to Dan, right, my dad, or Joe or Sam or Dave. And so I don't know about this. And so I think what I learned after the fact, because of course I just assumed everybody was in my head and kind of knew what right, I knew and why it was beneficial. And so I think one of the things that you learn, which it may be obvious to a lot of people, I don't like calling it change management because it sounds too formal. But anytime you're going to do a change, it really helps out to talk to the people that it's going to affect.
Yeah, certainly.
And then here's the other thing that I would say. When you talk to them, don't try to come across that you know it's going to work.
Or you're trying to sell it to them.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to say, hey, and in that buy-in sense, say, hey, here's what's happening. Here's where I think we need to go. I'm going to reserve the right to make the decision. But before we do that, I want your feedback. So I need you guys, we're going to regroup in a week. We're going to regroup in 2 weeks. If you're not comfortable speaking in front of everybody, then, you can talk to me, but it would be nice if we could do it in a meeting. So I don't have, 20 meetings, but I really want, this is going to affect your job. Here's the ways I think it's going to affect it, but there's going to be ways that I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you can go into that, if some people would call that vulnerability or transparency, I think it's just honesty. I think when you go in, pride comes before a fall. If you go in and you say, here's what's going to happen. Here's the change we're going to make. Here's how it's going to affect you. It's going to be perfect. It's going to be awesome. We need everybody to go in. Like even if they have buy-in, things are going to go different, right? You talked about 2020. If it's 2019, you said, well, our 5-year plan says we're going to do this.
Oh yeah.
Well, how did that work out?
It was going great until it wasn't.
Right. So I think people do love to crave clarity, but I think one of the most clear things you can tell somebody is that here's what we think's going to happen. But to be honest and to be clear with you, there's going to be a lot of things that come at us that we could have never seen.
Yeah, it's going to hit us in the side of the head.
Exactly.
Right? And I'm going to do my best to look out for those things and make sure that they don't, based on my experience, my knowledge, and we're going to communicate about this. But we're going to get hit in the side of the head, and we're going to need to talk. This transcends so many things. Yep. So a lot of the conversations I have on this show are not about business, but in reality, this isn't a business talk. Right. This is a humans talk. Right. It's how to deal with humans in all different types of scenarios and in chaos and when it's calm. And so when it comes to the training industry, I talk to a lot of law enforcement officers, and people within that industry or within that profession that have they do different things. And all the things that you're saying are really the same things. They're the problems that they're having in the profession of law enforcement, is that they're being they may have somebody that's a leader, quote unquote leader. It's a hot topic, law enforcement leadership right now, that is trying to solve their officers' problems. But they never actually talk to the officers about what their problems really are. Right. It's like a perceived problem. Right. Or they heard from maybe some other level of leadership, right? That some director in your business somewhere, right? Like, hey, we think this is a problem. Cool. All right, well, tell me about the problem. What are you hearing? Well, who did you talk to, right? And then you go down and actually talk to those people or have these informational conversations, whatever they are. My point in saying that, or kind of trying to draw the parallel here, is it's the same for like the trainer that's trying to work with a certain client, right? Yeah. Like in the training industry, right? That the firearms training industry, like they're delivering something that's probably really good information, right? But did you actually ever stop to ask what the client needs, or what the person that's actually paying you? You're working for them, man. Right. Did you even talk to them about this? Right. Like, where are you getting these ideas? What was your sample size? What was your experiment? Right. And whatnot. And it's really the communication process and the looking for the important things, and not working just off data, right? Yep. But it's building the culture piece. Just circling back to that, you said the word, and that's alignment. Yep. Right. And if you don't have that, your culture is going to be a little bit messy. And again, it starts with the right people, but the other word that you used was vision. Yep. Right. And not having like too many goals, being like these pinpointed things, these milestones. The milestones should happen at the pursuit of this vision, which you also said was unobtainable. Yep. Right. It's this constant journey to be better and get better, and it continues to evolve. And again, it transcends a lot of things. And personally, people should look at that for themselves. I mean, if you manage yourself the same way I'm listening to Joe talk about how he manages and directs his business, like, I bet things would be a lot different for you. And I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying, like, check in here. Like, where am I with this in this decision-making process? And who's this? What does this decision, or who does this decision impact? Does it impact my kids? Does it impact my wife? Does it impact my coworkers? Whatever. How does it impact them? because however it impacts them is going to impact you, dude.
Right.
Like at the end of the day.
Right.
So I think I'm just saying this because there's probably people listening to this. They're not able to connect those dots, not because they're dumb. Going back to what you said, it's the engineer and the salesperson. Right. They just haven't thought about it that way, or they can't articulate it in their own head.
Well, I think you're right. And I think a couple things. So first of all, most problems in an organization, if you go back to it, it's an alignment issue.
Yeah.
It's an alignment issue. And then the other thing too, and this is kind of it maybe sounds a little bit like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, but I don't think I am. And that is, so when you have alignment, you have the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. The cool thing is it doesn't feel messy, but life is messy.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that's one of the problems with teaching. And it's actually a nice thing about a conversation like this because it's more aligned with reality. So one of the things is when people are teaching something, they have to teach it in a linear progression, because that's how people are going to digest it better. So they write a book and they have chapters, and that chapter has a nice progression to it. Or we do a video and shows you how to do something, has a nice progression to it. And so it's good that you do that way. But the problem and the thing that I would love to get in people's heads, whether they're coaching, but particularly the receivers of it, is to understand this is really helping me out. And yet it's probably never going to happen like this in real life. Right. Don't get addicted to a linear progression, because life is not a linear progression. It really isn't. And maybe the seasons are to some degree, although they'll sometimes have jacked up seasons per year. But for the most part, so the goal really isn't to learn the linear progression. The goal is to learn the key principles that are being taught. Yep. And then you can say, okay, now when I'm in these myriads of situations that come up, I have a principle to draw upon, as opposed to being frustrated, which is what usually happens when people are too processorial, or they've been too addicted to the linear progression, is then reality happens and they're frozen. They don't know how to operate because they've fallen in love with just this tight, linear, perfect progression of how things are supposed to go. And I would just really love for that to get out to people, because I think they'd be better served, and I think they'd be a lot happier.
So the shooters out there that are listening to this right now, they're going, oh, wait, that sounds very familiar, right? And it's because we talk frequently about not violating the basic principles. First off, understanding what they are.
Right.
You're trying to hit the thing with the little things that come out of the other thing. Right. Like that's what you're trying to do, right? At the end of the day, you're trying to do that fast and accurate and all the things, right? Whatever the buzzwords are. There's process to this, right? And there's principles that need to be applied within the process. And if you can know all the principles and you can know all the process, it's how do you perform those things?
Right.
And there, again, going back to there's no one way for everybody. There's some individuality that comes up with this, and life being messy. There are considerations, right? Mm-hmm. Like what does the environment look like? There's lots of things. I won't even get into all that, right? The point of it is the in-between stuff. When life gets messy, that's when the exploration process happens. When the little things aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, even though I think I'm doing the things, to the thing. Like, what are those things? Let me explore this a little bit, right?
Right.
And again, that's the point that they're like, if all they're going back to is just the step-by-step process, they have missed the most important piece, which is this is where the most growth will happen for you, right? And the principles get that much more rooted, and you have a deeper understanding of that principle and how it impacts things differently based on application, right? Yes. Who you're dealing with, what the specific circumstance or environment might be. And I think it's really interesting just in terms of the parallels with regard to problem solving, decision making, right? Again, alignment. Right. At the end of the day.
Well, and so I love that you mentioned that, because a good example is, let's somebody listened to this and they said, oh, that birthday idea sounds really good. What was his progression? Yeah. And it's like, well, hold on a second, right? It's like, notes, no, the principle is that, like, in our organization, our mission is care, create a rare experience.
You guys care about people,
We care about people, right? So it's like my dad was thinking and I'm thinking, and we're all thinking like, hey, how do we show up and care for people? And so my dad's thinking, well, hey, like, everybody's unique. Everybody's a one-on-one. And he didn't mean it in the snowflake sense. He meant it in the sense that truly every person is a one-on-one.
It's a true statement.
And he said, when they're born, that's when that one-of-one came in to the world. And I want to celebrate that. And, maybe their family celebrates it, but, or maybe they don't. But somebody here is going to say, hey, you being born was a big deal. And so that's where, you know, he kind of came up with this idea. And then, you know, and then those reading those and then calling them love letters, it was just really authentic. And I think, again, if somebody, if whether they use that acronym or not, I don't care.
If you connect with that or not.
But if you connect with like, well, no, I care about people. I'm going to show up, be like, cool. Like, wow, what does that look like for you? Yep. You know, and what does it look like to engage with them? And now you're free to use the principle to come up with ideas that are going to be authentic to you and your organization. And so, like, yeah, I think we would all be better off if we spent our life just hunting for key principles. And because principles play, whether like if you're an NFL fan, they're like a good defense. They you know, they travel well in cold weather and warm weather, whether you're playing a passing team or a running team, you know, is principles is they travel well. And so you would be much better served if you lived your life off of principles versus coming up with just overly structured tactical, you know, plans.
Yeah. And if the goal is to master the craft or reach the goal, right? It makes it so much easier to do that when you stick to those things and you really understand those things.
Right.
And that's, I think that's the point. Going back to caring about people.
Yeah.
I can just envision in my head again, because I've had this conversation as a business owner and as a coach and all the things. I can hear people going like, man, that just sounds like a lot. It is a lot, man.
It is a lot.
Like you have to be invested.
Right.
You have to be invested. The most successful people that I know, when I say success, I'm not talking about what their bank account looks like.
Right.
I look at the holistic, you know, what is the body of work here? Like, what does the family life look like? What does the financial solvency look like? Okay, that's an important thing, right? It's an important thing. How are you handling your person, right? Like, are you really caring for yourself? Do you even care about yourself, or is it all about the one thing, right? You kind of look at this thing. Again, people listen to this and man, this is getting a little bit out there. You know, like, what are you talking about? What I'm talking about in terms of caring about people is at the end of the day, you can go through your whole business career not caring about a soul except for yourself, but it's going to show up.
Yeah.
It will show up at some point. And
it might be your funeral.
That's the point.
Right.
Like,
I mean,
every day you have to get up and look at yourself in the mirror, right? It's at some point, like what not caring ends up doing, whether that's caring about yourself, caring about your customer, caring about the people that you work with or work for or work around or whatever else, you will wake up one day and you will regret this. And it will impact every aspect of what I just said. Your health, right? Your financial health, right? The people that are around you. And that is not something that I am wired to feel good about, right? You know?
Yeah.
And so, again, I think, you know, as people are out there kind of thinking about handling themselves and handling their business, like, that's the again, key foundations being the principles piece is the caring, is giving a shit. For lack of a better term, you have to care.
Yeah.
And if you're not in that, then there may be a place for you in the team somewhere, but not on your team.
Right.
Right.
Well, right. Because we want to be aligned. So I'll tell you this story. I can't remember if we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we talked, but so this is a story that really hit me and I think hit this principle. So this is probably mid 2000s, you know, maybe 2007, 8, something like that. And I'm the sales manager now. And we have an employee, and I'm going to call him Jim. It's not his name. And phenomenal with the customers. Okay. Just really just lights out with the customers. They love him. He loves working with them, but he was going through some tough stuff in his life. And so he wasn't showing up as much.
Life is messy.
Right? So when he would engage with customers, he was still good, but you know, he was again going through some tough stuff, and the team was feeling it. They're kind of saying, hey, you know, so-and-so, we can't rely on him as much, right? So we had some conversations, and I was getting ready to have maybe the conversation before one where we might have to let him go. Yeah. And so I did what I often do, and sometimes I still do, and call my dad, but I went into his office and I said, hey, I'm getting ready to have this tough conversation with Jim. And I know the things I need to say, but I really want him to know that I care about him.
Okay.
You know, when we're in there, I want him, because I don't want him just to feel this hammer coming down, right? And then one of the first, you know, difficult conversations I had as a manager, and especially with somebody who otherwise just fit our culture perfectly. Okay, so anyway, so I sit down and I ask him this question, and my dad says, okay, when's this meeting? And I said, well, it's tomorrow. And he goes, okay, you know, move it back a week. So I got one of those manila, you know, or the legal pad.
Taking notes. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, move it back 1 week, right?
Gotcha.
Okay. And I said, well, now what? And he goes, all right, well, here's what I want you to do. He goes, for this next week, when you wake up and you're brushing your teeth and you're working out in the morning and you're driving into work, I want you to think about Jim. And when you're on your lunch break, if you got some spare time to think, I want you thinking about Jim. And when you drive home, I want you thinking about Jim. I want you to think because you know a little about what's going on in his life. I want you to think what that might be like. What's it like to be Jim right now and going through these tough stuff? He's like, I want you to do that. I want you to do that all week long. Spend as much time as you can really thinking about Jim. And I'm like, okay, what are you thinking about Jim? Thinking about Jim, right? So he finally gets done, and I'm on point 2, and I'm thinking, okay, now what's point 3? And he said, well, then you go have the meeting.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? Like, then go have the meeting. What do you mean? Like,
right.
How,
give me the answer to the test, Dad.
Yeah. Where do I sit? How do I shake his hand? Look at me, right?
Test, man. Yeah.
So what I had realized was, so this is what he says to me, and this is what I realized. So he goes, Joe, here's the thing. He's like, if you spend the next week doing what I just told you, you're going to come out caring about Jim.
He's going to feel that.
And he's going to feel it. Yeah. Ironically, the best way to show somebody you care about them is to, in fact, actually care about them.
Yeah, weird.
And then, and he said, and you don't need any other tactics. So that's another thing I realized in that moment is I came in looking for the progression list. And what he did is he gave me a principle of care. And so the idea is if somebody wants to adopt that, because it's worked really well for Vortex, and I think it'll work well for other people. Will it make you number one in your from a sales perspective in your industry? I don't know. Right. It'll make your life more rich, and I do think it will help your bottom line as a byproduct.
I agree 100%.
But the thing is that if you really have to, if you want your organization to be a certain way, you kind of have to have one of those coming to Jesus moments. And that's what I had to do there. It was like, was I really going to care about him or not? Or did I want to project? Did I just want to project, and have him perceived that I care without really caring? Now, I don't think I didn't care about him when I walked in my dad's office, but I don't think it was like as high as it could have been. And I knew, and he knew that. And so it was a very wise thing for him to say, move that back, and the advice he gave me. But that's one thing I think about a lot since then in that mid-2000s all the way through, whether it's care or something else, is am I after the perception of the thing, or am I really actually trying to be the thing? And I think regardless if your organization runs on care like ours does, or it runs on something else, whatever that thing is, like Curly and City Slickers, that one thing, whatever that thing is, you got to really look in the mirror and say, okay, am I really going to actually become the thing? Or am I just really going to do the perception of the thing? Because that's where people are really smart. We sniff out at humans being inauthenticity real quick. Yep. And so I think that would be, again, we're really not having a business conversation, but it does so happen to apply to business.
100%. I think as a result of what you said and sniffing it out and you deal with enough on the customer end, you deal with enough of that over time, particularly at this day and age when everything is farmed out.
Yep.
Right? You don't even talk to somebody at the company. Like, just try to call your phone company or your bank if you have a problem with your account or your telephone. That thing's been farmed out 3 times. It's like, you're talking to somebody else in some other place of the planet. Like, oftentimes it's not even a real human being, right? It's AI. When it is, there's dogs barking in the background or whatever else. Like, they're just trying to get to the end of that conversation, as an example.
Right.
But I think the peeling the layers back, that this cannot be manufactured. And if because it has been so much and it's so kind of like endemic, right, in large business now, and as business has gotten bigger and technology takes over and so forth. And I promise I'm getting somewhere with this point.
Yeah.
People are getting really cynical about it. And so going back to my experience with Vortex, my initial experience with the people, not the product, but the people, I sat back for a little bit. I go, is this for real? Like, what is going on? Because I get that a lot actually at my business. Like, really? Because this is different. Like, this doesn't seem right. Something doesn't seem right. How is this happening? Or what's the angle? Right? And I think people are right to feel that way, right? Because I'm not going to tell you you're wrong to feel the way that you feel. Right. At the same time, I think being discerning about what you're witnessing or what you're experiencing right now is a very valuable skill. Right. What I got differently from Vortex was like, man, this thing just keeps happening. Right. Which was fascinating to me. Right. And again, it goes back to everything we've already talked about it. You've already articulated in terms of alignment and making sure that actually gets trickled down, because you're actually showing people that and how to do it. they might not feel comfortable doing it at first, right? And they do care. They're just not sure how to do it. That might come off a little bit too much, right? Or it might not be like, it may be a little sterile because they're trying to go through process to how do I show this correctly, when it really comes down to the root, which is like, you actually do have to care.
So I think, again, this is something, especially for the business owners, I think anybody, but business owners, I think one thing to think about is this world is going at this breakneck speed towards AI, automation, and efficiency, right? Those are the gods of the day.
Efficiency.
Right, exactly. And so a couple things. So first of all, let's just take people who, when they do the call, right? Let's just take that for instance. We all know what people want when they call. They want a real human being who can speak their language, who is empowered to help,
can solve their problem,
and likes helping people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So that's what they want.
I'm surprised these days. Like I am so surprised when I get somebody on the phone that's like that. Like I'm like, I'll call them, you've been so great today. This has actually been like, I was dreading this phone call for 2 days because this is the only time on my schedule. And this is exactly the opposite of how I expected.
So more of those love letters, because I get every love letter every week, right? And so every week there's 40, 50, 60 of them, right? I cannot tell you how many that we get. And it's just because they talked to Sarah or Ryan or Kenny.
There's a name.
Right? In our
human.
And they just helped them.
Right.
But they are ready to run through a brick wall. They're like, I will never buy from anybody else because of that. So couple things here. So first of all, you get people that authentically care about other people, right? And then also in our case, we empower them to help. They don't have a bunch of SOPs that they have to do. If customer says this, I have to do this. No, they just get to solve problems. They love people. Okay, so that's authentic regardless of the outcome. But it just so happens that the outcome is, in our case, you've got a powerhouse brand, okay? And I don't say that to brag, but I say that because I want people to see what causes that. And in this case, we lean into human beings. We lean into the mess when somebody calls and they ask a question that we weren't prepared for or doesn't fit. So I'll give you an example. So we're known for our VIP warranty, very important promise.
Yep, it's legendary.
We'll repair or replace anything for free, right? So let's say you've got somebody, but they're in a unique situation, right? They're like in the middle of, Costa Rica, and their binocular fell off a cliff and the objective lens bent a little bit, okay? And they're like, so they call up, right? And so normally we'd send them a label to send it back. And then it's like 5-day turnaround time we get them. But they're like, this is maybe the only time they've been to Costa Rica. And they're never going to go again, right? They don't know.
This is the bucket list trip.
Right. So what is going to happen is our guys are going to be like, well, we have to get them a new bino now. And so what they're going to do is they're going to get with the dealer team and they're going to say, hey, do we have a Costa Rica retailer that's close to this person? You better believe we do. And they just so happen to have, and even if they don't have the exact bino, they've got a nice bino. So we would call them and say, hey, and then we'll call the customer and we'll sync them up. Sometimes we'll even have the dealer drive at like 30 miles in like a midpoint or something like that and hand them a pair of binoculars. They hand them back, right? Because we're trying to lean into what do they actually need? And of course, if you go even further back, what is that? That's just really the golden rule. Treat people how you want to be treated, right? But now see, that plays out in all these different situations in this unique Costa Rica example that I just gave you. But there's a myriad of examples. And I really, really believe if people trusted that, they would be rewarded over a long period of time with customers that are loyal, that spread the word to their friends and their family. And so it's going to be your biggest marketing tool. But you've got to trust these key principles instead of saying, well, if we hire a person like that, I can't pay them bottom dollar and I got to cover their benefits. And they're seeing it as all these negatives. But instead of flipping it and seeing all these positives, saying, no, I've got a person who can make a career out of this. They're going to stick around forever. They love this job. My customers love them, and so, they're going to cost money because you got to pay them, and you should, and you should give them good benefits. But the byproduct is you're going to deliver a much better experience, and the byproduct of a better experience is you're going to get more sales, more customers.
Yeah. It's the reverse engineering of the process, right? I say the same thing all the time. The way I have to kind of look at it, I operate my company the exact same way, man. It's got to be customer focused. It's customer centric all the time.
Yeah.
The next place that has to be, the focus has to be is on the people that service those customers, right? Is your employees. And then lastly, if you do those two things really well, usually the company gets taken care of in the end. You still have to perform. There are things that have to happen, right? And that's my job to make sure that, those things are happening the way they need to happen. Make adjustments, do promos, right? Whatever the thing is, right? Marketing, the advertising, the operations stuff, administration on the back end. But if you handle it in that order, it generally works out. And I say that to say for the audience is fairly broad that listens to this. We have shooters. And within the shooters, that means a lot of things, right? Maybe they do that for a living, right? They need to be able to do that for a living, right? It could be people that are in the product, part of end of this, like you are, like what contributes to this somehow. It could be the customer, right? Obviously that buys the training or buys the products. It could be the leader in the law enforcement agency that is really struggling right now to change culture. He's got all the passion and all the care in the world. He's just not sure how to do it, right? Like where do we start with this in an institution that seems like turning a battleship, right? Like how do we do this, just one small step at a time? But go back to some of the key principles. It's alignment, man. You got to get alignment. First off, you have to care. There has to be alignment, right? There's some basic principles here. Like who are you trying to take care of right now? Yourself? Or the people that you're working with, or the people on the street. It's okay to care about all of that. Like you need to, right? But where are you putting your priorities like right now? And how's that being reflected? Like where is that going?
Well, and then here's another thing too to think about, just to try to really simplify it, is are you investing in things that are constantly changing? Or would you be better served investing in things that never change? Well, I want to invest in things that never change. And here's some things I know that never change. Principles don't change. They don't care if you believe in them or not. They just are. You're better off if you align to a principle than just to fight a principle. So I want to know what principles are within the world. But the other thing is like, so for instance, it's never changed. Customers want to be treated well. It's never changed. Employees want to be treated well. That's never going to change. There's a lot of different mediums that you can use and ways to interact. Sure, that can change. But one thing is that we built our company on is on things that I feel like don't change. And people, they will always want good service. And service, again, can be the product, can be the widget, it can be the call,
internal,
it can be the warranty, right? It can be all these things, but they all want it fast, they all want it friendly, they all want people that they feel to actually like and care about them on the other end. Those things don't change, and so we're trying to be experts in things that don't change.
Yeah, I think the interesting part, one of the more impressive parts for me in this is that I think you see this, again, starting as a small family business, right? With the birdseed store.
Yeah,
right?
totally. Yeah.
And to where it is now at such scale. And that being a very, very tough thing to scale, right? It has to be built from the bottom up. And, a lot of people are walking into situations where that, as the new CEO or as the new manager or director of such and such, well, that doesn't exist. And it's not easy.
Right.
It's hard to do, right? In terms of the time it takes and the energy it takes in order to get there.
Well, but then I would say too, one good thing for people to study would be study compound interest. So compound interest looks like this, right? It's kind of like, it's kind of, a lot of people would call it oppressive mediocrity. And then you hit an inflection point, but then it goes up at a steep incline. And a lot of people want to look at the inflection point and say, what did you do here? And what they don't realize, it's actually accumulation. But you need time. You need to give it time. And I think it's also interesting when you see compound interest violated, what happens. And I think one of the better examples I can think of is when people win the lottery.
Yeah, it's a great example.
When people win the lottery, it is almost undoubtedly the worst thing that happens in their life.
Things get stupid.
Because they violated compound interest. They were here, and then they went here financially.
It's like instant fame.
Exactly. Right. And it's so, I think one thing I would strongly recommend people that if they're struggling with the audacity of the timeline, because it was like, we weren't number one in sport optics right away. So we probably got to that number one from a sales perspective in like 2016, 2017. And my dad was selling optics before 2002. So in some ways you could say from 86 to 2015, 2016, it's a long time, even from 2002. Now we were growing all that time, but the inflection point was like 2011, 2012, and then it just really started to go. But we were committed to what now I've realized was a compound interest perspective. We were committed to this long term. And I really think whether it's fitness, right? I'm sure fitness is the same thing.
Yep.
You know, whether you're in art or you're in a podcast or whatever it is, it's just a principle. So align yourself to that principle of compound interest. And I think it's not just about your 401k. It's about anything that you want to get good at.
Yep. Yeah. So let's change gears a little bit on this. So like that said, let's go back to how I started this we're at SHOT Show.
Yeah.
Like, and you're out here, right? Yeah. And you're doing stuff. And I'm sure you've been to 100 of these things at this point. Well, maybe not quite that many, but several.
Fair amount.
Like, what is life like for you when you come to SHOT Show? What's the life of you as the CEO of Vortex Optics here? Like, what are you doing this week?
I spend a lot of time with our product engineers going over like new product ideas, different technologies and stuff like that. And so, it's interesting, like my brothers, they all like have this like super technical, like they're geniuses when it comes to tech. I am not. Okay. So I will have a different perspective than, even though our engineers and designers, I feel like are very well-rounded. I'm going to come at it really from the perspective of customers and dealers. And is it approachable? Is it, what's the experience like? Is it easy enough to pick up, or is this overly complex? Is it overly engineered? I'm also good at connecting the dots, so I'm always trying to connect the dots. But outside of that, what I like, so podcasts like this, dinners with people in the industry that are either customers of ours or maybe we're a customer of theirs, I love to connect there. I love to people watch. And so when I go on the show, I'm people watching, I'm observing. I'm a big, in some areas of my life, I'm definitely a spirit of the law versus letter of the law. Yep. So I'm like, it might sound really squishy, but I'm trying to get the spirit of the place and just kind of like, what's the pulse? I like that. I like absorbing through osmosis. I'm a big intuition guy, and I still look at data and I still get feedback from all different types of people, but I'm just trying to suck all that up and trying to get like a pulse of like, how is this year kicking off? I'm in touch a lot with our team walking the floor and our team all over. So they know they can text me anytime and text an idea. I'm texting them ideas. We like to move quick. So it's kind of squishy, I guess where I'm at, but I really dig that. It's just like whenever I get to go to one of our retailers, I just want to soak up the place. And interestingly, the number one thing we get when people visit us is they'll compliment us on a lot of things, but they'll compliment us on the atmosphere. They'll say it's a super warm atmosphere. Everybody's looking to help you out. Everybody's kind. Everybody's happy. And so that's a little bit different, but that same spirit is kind of what I'm trying to capture in the industry.
Oh, I mean, that's very consistent. And I would save that question for the end. Didn't know what you're going to say there, but it's completely aligned with everything that you've talked about, and that makes perfect sense to me. And again, people want to think it's squishy. Okay, fine, squishy.
Right?
Have your opinion, whatever it is, but it actually ties back to everything you just said. It's very much the way I operate as well. And people are like, "What are you doing? What new stuff?" I go, "Man, there's so much stuff down there. I don't even know. I don't know. Like, I'm not going down there to see anything new. I'm going down to see the people, make the connections, get my finger on the pulse of what's going on. Like, sometimes I find myself in a little bubble, right? You talk to people inside the silo to a certain extent. You get getting the same feedback. Like, ask questions, listen. Like, well, what is happening? Make new friends. Bounce things off of one another. Ask good questions, and that's all. That's what it should be. Now, I know a lot of people come here for different reasons, right? There's a lot of meetings, a lot of deals being done and all that kind of stuff. But from the leadership perspective, that seems very smart to me, because you have the other people doing the things that they need to do to make their cogs in the wheel turn better. And they're going to come back and they're going to tell you, and then you put all the pieces together.
And they're better at it than I am.
Yeah, that's the other admission that you just made right there, which was like, I am not the most technological dude. I'm not either, man. At this point, my career, I can't fit much more in my head. I like learning new things, but some of this stuff is like, I can't do it. So I find good people to help me with that, right?
Bingo.
But you allow them. Again, you talked about alignment, and within that there being you didn't say this, but what I gather is people have autonomy to do the right things in order to get the thing going the direction it needs to go. So on that, just kind of segueing out of that, like, talk about what's going on with Vortex in 2026. I mean, what are you most excited about?
Well, I mean, a lot of things. So I am excited about When I spend a lot of time with the engineers and the product guys, like they put a lot of time and effort into these products that we're launching this year, and a lot of thought. And obviously it takes a village. So you got marketing, you have sales, you have supply chain.
It's like a race team.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited on the launches. I like to see our customers' reaction, but also for me, because mostly my customers are the team members or employees. Yep. So I just love to see their work come to fruition and also ultimately impact positively our customers and our dealers. So that's a huge thing I'm excited about. So to that end, there's a couple new products that came out, a 1 to 10 AMG, 100% made in the United States. That's a scope that we just launched. So that was a labor of love for the team.
It. Yep.
So that one was exciting one. There's also a relay network. So a lot of our devices are now being connected. They're interconnected with one another through Bluetooth. And there's this relay network that our guys developed, and all those products, when you use them, the user interface and how easy they are to use, they're extremely easy to use. And I'm a great litmus test of that if I can figure it out. So this relay network, not just that it's cool that item or products can interconnect with one another, but the fact that they just sync so well and so seamlessly, and it's so easy on the customer's perspective. I think I'm excited about that. Then there's a Talon binocular bino rangefinder, which uses that relay that is just getting released this Thursday. So a little early on that. So those are exciting. I think for me personally, I'm starting my podcast, and a lot of people have come to me over the years and said, "Hey, how did Vortex become Vortex? How did you get so big? And how do you do this and that and the other?" And so I'm kind of opening up the playbook of I'm telling a lot of stories about, my dad, me, my brothers, and the company, and just sharing like how we've done it. And you don't have to do it our way. You don't have to call it the things we want to call it. But I'll say this: I really want to make the world a better place. And I want to run a good business, and I want people that work for us or work with us, I want that to be an enjoyable experience. I want part of or all of those 90,000 hours to be as optimized as they can. And I am not perfect, and we are not perfect, but I think we've specialized in that, especially when you look across whether it's our industry or other industries. We've done that really well, and I'm hoping that it inspires and equips people to lean into caring for other people, to lean into making your company the most human company as opposed to the most efficient or AI. And again, I actually don't think those things are bad.
Oh, I don't either.
I just don't think they're ultimate things.
They're not the answer
People
to everything.
are in the center. And so I'm real excited about that platform care movement, and not just the podcast, but just putting that message out there and hoping that other leaders and people can be inspired to kind of do the same. So I'm real excited about that. There's probably other stuff. I'm excited. Golf is still in its infancy. We're going to be rolling out thermal this year, so our first thermal product. So I'm really excited about that. That was a product, again, where I think for some people it can be intimidating to get into because it's a very techy product. And I think the product that the guys came up with and they're going to be launching not only is a really good quality product, but also the ability to use it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Right? Because ultimately that's what happens is people use our products. And again, I think the guys did an incredible job with that. And again, I'm in my seat as a CEO, as much as I love our customers and our dealers, our employees are my customer. Yep. And so I and our team are just trying to make that the best experience as possible for our employees who will ultimately then deliver that to the dealers and the customers. So any ways that we can do that, we've got some ideas this year of new things that we can do. I'm just always about that.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think it's so smart what you're doing in terms of telling the story. I think there's a lot of great companies out there, and I think they don't do a very good job at telling their own story. I'm not saying they're horrible at it. I'm just saying they could, if they worked on it as hard as they work on their business, telling that story, it would help people understand. More than ever, I say this a lot, but more than ever now, and nothing so far has changed my mind about it. That is, customers out there, particularly in the space, want to know who they're getting their stuff from. They want to know.
They do way more than in the early 2000s or even the mids.
Very informed. Very informed.
It's a big deal.
And that partly comes from the public space and the court of public opinion and what people say. And that usually comes down to the product, obviously, whatever it is that they're purchasing, but also it comes down to the service or the experience that more specifically, the experience they've had with the product. Yeah. And ultimately, sort of the theme of this being the people. And was the big standout for me with Vortex, and why I enjoy using the product that works well for me when I use it well, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I certainly there's it's the movie Tommy Boy, right? You know, where you have the little guarantee fairy, right, or whatever else. And I think it's funny, like it's a funny thing. But you know, the line in that movie is, you know, I could stamp guaranteed on the box, I could guarantee a lot of things, but what have I really sold you? You know, kind of thing.
Right.
And it does feel good to know, like, if something happens, like the hard-earned dollars that I spend on the product to help me perform at a level that I needs to perform as well. And if there's a challenge with it, I can call somebody up and they can help me with it, whatever that happens to be. Right. I think that's important. Right. And that story needs to be told about how that actually happens, because all they're putting is a money back guarantee, or like it's a 5-year warranty, or whatever, just send it back. But there's no real, there's no teeth in any of it. Right. I guess was what I'm saying. So I guess, again, it's exciting to hear, and like I'm stoked for you to be able to go do that. I know that'll be a little bit of a new journey for you.
Totally, and I'm gonna start that compound effect.
Yeah, you got to learn a lot of new stuff. Yeah, and you start kind of building one piece at a time. But I hope it encourages other people. And again, I think people are hungry for that stuff now. Not just the customer who wants to know who they're getting their stuff from. But they're hungry for how to improve their thing. There's so much. There's so many entrepreneurs out there. There's so many business owners, business leaders, not even in business. But again, I mentioned, like, there's like those business owners that listen to the show, and the consumers that listen to the show. They're business owners, or they're managers in the business that they work for or own, or whatever the case is. Leaders in other institutions. Right. There's a lot of those that listen to the show as well. All of the things you talked about are very valuable lessons. And you mentioned the term connecting dots. Yeah. Like, we're talking about a company culture, but what we're talking about is humans, and the culture that I think everybody kind of strives to live in at some level, and taking your place in, right? Whatever that happens to be. And it really is about aligning with humans in there. The communication has to happen. And so you are responsible for communicating that message out, you know, at some level. So I'm sure, you know, your employees will be looking back and going, I wonder what Joe's talking about today, and like watching you on your journey and whatever else. I'll certainly be watching. And I guess I just say this, man, like, if it's not obvious already, I'm a huge fan of the company, right?
Thank you.
But I'm a bigger fan of the people that have helped me and influenced me, assisted me within the company. Yeah. And part of the reason that happened was because other people told your story to me, right? I observed what I observed in the instance or the circumstance that I mentioned, but there are people out there that are using your products, right? And when I talk to those people that have very, very strong opinions about things, right? It's only positive stuff. Yeah. And I think that goes a long way, because it's not that they're very real about it, right? They might not love it all, but they're very positive. And the thing that comes up constantly is the people. And this last however long that we've spent, almost 2 hours sitting together, is basically confirms the reasons why. And I think it's really cool, man. And if there's however I can support you guys in getting that message out, and
well, this has been a big way. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you being here and giving me your time during a busy week with all the things that you got going on, and your team and everything else. So they helped put this together, right? This was a team effort to get you here today. So I just want to thank you for your time and energy that you provided me. I'm inspired in a lot of ways. It's given me a lot to think about, going back to my own business and how I conduct the podcast and things like that. And there's some motivating stuff in there for me. So without the risk of overdoing it, man, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you. That means a lot. And this was a ton of fun. And I'm glad that some of the stories and feedback will be inspiring for you. I hope they will for other people. And also, it's good for me, because when I put this out there publicly, again, I got to go back and I got to make sure that I live this out every day. And I'm not perfect, and some days I miss. But it's kind of inspiring for me to, again, continue to lean into caring for people and putting them at the center, and making sure that everything flows out from there.
Well, keep doing that. And best of luck to you and everybody over at the Vortex team with all the new products and all the stuff you're doing. Enjoy the rest of your time, and look forward to watching what happens next for you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.